Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it.
Excited to have on today Sandy Weiner, who is the CEO and founder of lastfirstdate.com and her newest venture, Woman of Value. Sandy is an amazingly deep and insightful coach who helps women actualize, self-actualize, and step into their power and stop accepting mediocrity. And boy, there's a lot there for everybody, even men, especially men, to learn about what's going on in the mind of the women in your life, or how to be a better man. And it's so important that the different topics we speak about the comfort zone, about pushing your boundaries, about learning how to be better. And what I hope is, and Sandy shares a lot of really powerful insights from her own life and her experience getting divorced and some of the challenges she had throughout her life, that we see that these issues are not, there's nothing wrong with you specifically, that these are issues that are really human challenges, and getting the guidance and the help and that you need to overcome them is completely doable. So with no further ado, I will shamelessly plug that you should reach out to Sandy, reach out to me if you need help overcoming your boundaries, overcoming your issues, living a more full and happy and successful life. And please, if you get value out of this, I ask you to please share, subscribe, reach out on social media. I appreciate so much you're listening. With no further ado, Sandy Weiner. Sandy Weiner, I'm thrilled to have you back on the podcast. You are one of the very few special return guests to celebrate the launch of the Women of Value brand, the podcast, the movement. I guess you can say you, in a previous life, were a successful dating coach, and now you're kind of like moving into a much broader spectrum, helping women step into their bliss.
Correct.
Okay, great. So first of all, like, why women? I mean, and it's an interesting thing when a lot of times we try to niche down into specific genders. Are women different than men in the sense that there's a specific path to female empowerment that doesn't work for the lesser gender, or how does that work?
I wouldn't call them lesser gender. I think that everybody struggles with finding their purpose, really stepping into their full value. I chose to work with women because I am a woman. I understand women better than men. I do understand men pretty well, though. And I feel that women often have given up their value to be a partner to, I can speak for myself. I settled a lot in life because I thought that's what you do. You work really hard to fit a square peg into a round hole. And if it doesn't work, then you grind it a little harder and, you just stick in there. So all of my life experiences have taught me to be resilient and to make things work. But I was given a lot of, hard things to work with. And I really thought that was the best it could be. And I woke up to the reality, to the realization for myself that the relationship I was in for 23 years in my marriage was really not working for me for decades. I mean, it was about me trying to fit into this life that wasn't aligned with who I was. And, and giving up passion and purpose and my dreams, which I didn't even know what they were yet, to make somebody else happy. So I think women do this more than men. Women tend to be the supporter. They make everybody else a priority, especially in a family. It's like making everybody a priority and not themselves.
Well, if I could stop you there with that fascinating topic, when it comes to developing our own like dreams and passions and the bliss, like you call it. So I think that like you suggested, those of us, and I would say with those with a family, could be specifically women, but I think maybe men also perhaps, fall into a pattern of, putting out fires and getting along. And like you said, really like trying to make the best of the situation that they have. And they don't really spend a lot of time thinking about hopes and dreams and what makes them unique. So how did you define that? How do you discover that? Or how do you help clients figure out like their thing?
So I don't think that we need to be these self-centered people who only focus on ourselves. I'm not saying that at all. I think that when you're raising a young family, your dreams and hopes are often on the back burner.
Which is super important, by the way, because I think that if the American mindset is once you settle down and have kids, your life is effectively done. Where I think for a lot of people, having kids and raising a family is part of it, but then you really actually do. There is like life after your kids move out of the house and get married and stuff like that, which I think is a very like undiscussed topic in most, conventional circles.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to wait for your kids to grow up and leave the house and get married. I mean, my kids were 13, 16, and 19 when I got divorced and started to find what really lit me up. I think that we can do both. I think that it's certainly, if you're working in a job that sucks the life out of you, find other work. And I mean, don't just leave your job and get into tremendous debt. And, do it smartly and do it with support. But we spend most of our time at work. And so we're talking decades of soul sucking. It takes a toll on you. And I have to say,
why do people do it and how do people stop doing it?
People do it for safety. I think that we often settle for relationships, work, anything we settle for is because we don't think we have choices and because we value safety over joy. We think we have to make a choice between one or the other. And I advocate for finding both. I don't know that you can always live at that bliss level, but I think strive for it, and for me, I had to do my artwork. I had to find some way to be creative all the time in my marriage because that's what kept me sane. And even when I was working, before I got married, I was working in a graphic design firm. I hated the work. It was boring, but I would go home and I would do my art and I would exercise and do all the things that made me feel good. So I think it's also about finding that balance of what part of your life are you tending to yourself? And especially people who have young children. I watch my daughter who has 2 young children, and she's now starting to really tend to herself in ways that are so healthy. She started running again. She got a babysitter once a week for a few hours to get the kids out of the house and just have me time. We all need that. So that's a place to start if you're not making these huge changes. But if you're talking about like, where do you start to really find the work that lights you up and what are your passions? I have a process where I have people find their pivotal moments in their lives, those stories that are the highs and lows of your life, the things that really defined who you became in those moments. And so this is what Simon Sinek does with his process of finding your why. We learned the same thing in coaching school. So you find those moments that you remember that were really standing out in your mind, whether it was when you had a child, got married, had a sickness that you overcame. For you lost a tremendous amount of weight. I'm sure that was pivotal for you. And, so it's finding those moments and then mining those moments for the values in the moments. So who did you become in that moment? What did you learn about yourself? So I'll ask you, what did you learn about yourself when you lost a lot of weight? What did you learn?
That is a great question. I'm usually on the asking question side of it. So I'm going to switch hats for a second, if that's okay. So I think one of the ideas was that I didn't always have to be fat, that fat was a choice, and that I could change how people perceived me. I suppose that there was the ability to change my circumstances.
So that's big. And that's exactly what we're talking about here is like, know that you're a choice. And I would also add that I'll bet it taught you that with the right kind of discipline, you can probably accomplish just about anything.
That's interesting. So let's take and now again you're a very experienced coach, so we're gonna use the black belt skills here if that's possible. So I think there's different levels that we're talking about, and we're gonna go straight to like the hardcore stuff. So step number one is, you have someone who is, essentially miserable, and you start with, okay, what's your next best step? So that is, you're not exercising, try exercising. You're not spending any time with your spouse, get a babysitter one night a month, one night a week, whatever you want. You don't go, whatever, take care of yourself. So that's that first question of start to balance out your life. Mm-hmm. Now, stage two is, like you said, find the Simon Sinek moments of your why, of your moment, like for me with the transition and the changing and the discipline. What's the next step? Like, what's the actualized step? Because a lot of times people will really turned on by success and then try to bring that in a bigger way, but then don't know what to do or don't know how to apply that. Or it's like, for me, like, what do I do? I have this, like, I lost this weight, but like, how do I transition that and make a life out of it or something like that?
Right. So then you could make a living out of helping people lose weight. That's one way to go. That's a pretty logical way to go.
Okay.
But I wouldn't look at only that one pivotal moment. I would look at many, and then you start to connect the dots. What are the common threads throughout all of these pivotal moments? And in crisis, we often find our highest self. We find who we become, what do we step into because we're really challenged. And so those are the moments that, a lot of people miss them. So I just did this work with a young person. And one of the things I noticed is she had a lot of trauma in her life that she kind of whitewashed. It was sort of numbed out because it was so common that everybody has these things, but it's not true. And so what I noticed in her is that she made a lot of transitions in her young life where she stood up for what was important to her. And we found that she needs to have a voice, that she needs to also be involved in things that are both intellectually stimulating and creative. So, we start to find these things. These are things that have to happen in your life for you to feel aligned. And once you found those core values, those core things that you need, that has to feed into whatever you're doing, or you're going to feel drained. You're going to feel out of alignment. You're not going to be using your strengths. You're going to try and really up some of your weaknesses, but it may not, it might be like this wonky wheel that's just not rolling properly.
I think that one of the natural objections that a person finds in this situation is that, again, maybe this is not everybody, but I think if you look at the way that a lot of Americans live and the requirements and the lifestyle and everything like that, and whatever it is, something like 2/3 of Americans can't, are reliant on the next paycheck. What we speak about when we talk about doing work that isn't soul sucking, oftentimes run flat in the face of, okay, it's like, again, like the CPA, let's say CPA doesn't like what she's doing. I just picked that because that wouldn't be what I would like to do, right? Or someone's working in middle management somewhere, or someone is whatever, doing a job that they don't really care about, but it is paying the bills or paying the better part of the bills. Where is that space to transition your life and start to actually get paid for the stuff that you want to do? Like most people, that's like so preposterous, because it's like, how do I even do that? If I'm able to basically make, and I'll say it even stronger, is that, the certainty of a paycheck, the certainty of a decent paycheck oftentimes is so necessary for people that the idea of kind of venturing outside of that is like, how or why or what would I do? And how far would I have to go before I could actually make that same amount of money doing something I actually enjoyed?
Yeah, good question. I think there definitely has to be some leap of faith. Whenever you transition into something bigger, you have no idea what it's going to look like. And I mean, you have some idea. You can't just do it without a plan. So like, for instance, when I left my marriage, I didn't really know how I was going to support myself. I didn't leave because I met somebody else and I had a relationship to go to. I left into the abyss, but I left into the the possibility of really finding myself, because I had reached the limits of who I could become in that relationship. So if there's a ceiling.
How do you assess that? That's an interesting thing that, you know, I'm sure that you work with women that are married, and there are a fair amount of people that are in relationships and not necessarily, you know, perhaps looking to leave them. But the question is like, how do you assess whether you've reached your potential in that relationship, or what are some steps to going further if you feel like you're hitting ceilings without having to leave your spouse?
So I think you have to really assess which part is you, which part is them, and which part is the two of you together. And that requires some coaching. But we can always work on ourselves. And that's the part we have control over. And so like in my marriage, there were major communication issues. We just, our styles of communication, you know, and I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel seen for a long time. We handled crisis differently. And we had some big crisis that we had to deal with early on in our marriage. And parenting styles, completely different. So it was a lot of just hitting walls all the time. And, you know, John Gottman, who I think is brilliant, relationship therapist, he talks about the 5-to-1 ratio of positivity versus negativity. So when you're operating with so much negativity and you have very little positive to draw from, it just feels like failure after failure after failure, or just blocks. You're putting out bids to connect with the other person, and the bids are being rejected over and over again.
Right.
But to me, that's, you know, you've tried, you've worked on yourself, you've tried, maybe you've gone to counseling together, but if you have this many issues in a relationship, you know, it's not working. It's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. So take us on that journey though, for you, about really uncovering like your core cause, and how flexible is that? Meaning like you're launching a new venture now, and I can only assume that it's because you've gained more clarity into your life's purpose. But how scary is that to like transition and do something new after you already went out there and said, this is what I'm going to talk about?
It's very scary. So first of all, I didn't leave the other business. I just want to clarify. I'm running 2 businesses now,
there you go.
Which is a little crazy, but
Awesome.
I'm making it work.
Good.
And when I need more staff, I will go and get them. So that's the thing, is like a lot of people think I have to do it all myself. But I want to take a step back and just say, like, this message and this core purpose that I have, it's been honed over, you know, decades. And I tell the story in the about page of my website that from a very young age, I was labeled as the shy girl. I moved a lot. And so we moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Long Branch, New Jersey when I was 8 or 7 or 8. So I'm in first or second grade, I think. And I'm speaking Hebrew with a Southern accent, and all the kids, we had to read out loud. And anybody who made a mistake, you had to raise your hand, which was extremely shaming and it was terrible teaching habits. But anyway, I got raised my hand. People raised their hand a lot, like, you know, you're wrong. But it was just the accent. I mean, I actually spoke Hebrew really well because we had a really good Hebrew program in Atlanta. And I started to shut down. I didn't want to be judged. And so I got quieter and quieter, and the teacher really thought something was wrong with me and sent me to a psychiatrist.
No.
And I remember this. I remember being tested. I remember thinking, you know, what's wrong? And being told there's nothing wrong with her. She's just really shy. So what I realized many, many years later is that I wasn't shy. I was scared of judgment. And that fear of judgment made me not try a lot of things. It kept me quiet.
I gotta ask you, where did that come from? The fear of judgment? Like, was that point in your school career, or did you figure out it was something earlier?
Well, I figured it out much later, but I know that I didn't want to be judged.
Okay.
I know that to me was pretty obvious. And I think it speaks to my personality. It's a little bit of a perfectionist personality. You want things to be perfect. So that also stops you from achieving. And so the next label I got was underachiever. I moved to Baltimore when I was going into 7th grade and went to a very religious girls' high school where I was ahead in all the Jewish subjects. And so they wouldn't put me in the right class. They wouldn't put me in the next grade. And I was bored. So I stopped studying. I went from being a straight A student to not caring and underachieving. And so it became this shy underachiever. That was sort of the labels that I took on. And it's very disempowering to live beneath your potential, to just kind of live in that safety zone and in your comfort zone and not try things because you may fail and you may be mocked. And it took a long time for me to find my voice to really know how to speak up with empowerment, but with grace, and to try things that I thought were out of my league, like speaking on a stage and doing a TED Talk, and all these things were so far reaching, but that's where the good stuff happens. And so
was it an awareness? I had this crazy experience where I've always been, again, I don't know, in California, they like have this fear thing that I remember from like the youngest age, where there's like going to be this cataclysmic earthquake that's going to strike at some point in the near future. And California is set for this. I just saw recently a news article that there's supposed to be this cataclysmic storm also. Okay, fine. So I was wandering around the house a couple nights, it was about 2 weeks ago. And usually when it's quiet and I wander around the house, I just, a thought popped into my mind, like, I really hope there's not this terrible earthquake. And then for the first time in my life, I heard, that's your anxiety talking. And and I was shocked because I'm like living under this fear my whole life. And I always thought it was a logical fear, but I never had like that like flag of, oh, this is anxiety, that kind of popped up. And honestly, as soon as I labeled it as, I guess, a manifestation of this, fear of something that's outside of my control, and that I, won't be able to like save my family or myself, whatever it might be, I really haven't stressed out about that anymore. I guess the question is, once you labeled your underachiever status or your shy status, was that what propelled you to be like, oh, I'm actually not shy, I'm actually not an underachiever?
It wasn't like boom overnight, but yeah, coaching school really helped me.
Okay.
Doing scary things helped me. So leaving my marriage, and I'll tell you, even way before that, and I think I've spoken to you before about the fact that I lost my first son when he was 5 years old. Going through that experience of having a child born with a fatal genetic disease that was misdiagnosed, that I started to realize that I had certain intuition medically. I was the one who said his diagnosis is wrong. I was the one who decided which doctors to use, when surgery was supposed to happen. I had no medical background. I had never stood up to someone in power before. And I realized that if I didn't stand up for my son, his life would be in jeopardy. And then standing up to people who were trying to medicate me when I just had him, and like give her Valium, crazy mother, she might be nuts. And I'm like, no. I'm the only rational one here. I need to be fully awake. I'm not going crazy, and you are not going to do that to me. And so all those little steps added up. It was finding my voice, and it's easier to advocate for someone else, for your child, than it is for yourself in the beginning. But knowing that I had certain wisdom that I never knew I had before gave me more confidence. And when I got divorced, there was this piece of me that was unfulfilled, this piece that I always had, the ability to connect with others, to really understand people's problems, to have empathy and be sensitive to other people. And I said, I need to pursue that. So that was an unfulfilled part of me. So doing art for other people, actually, it was gratifying, but it felt devaluing many times because I didn't get the value back for the amount of labor and love that I put into a piece.
So I think that there's two really fundamental points that I'm hearing you make. One is that sometimes it's too difficult to do it yourself in the beginning, so you could do it for somebody else. And in the process of doing it for somebody else, you can find that you are doing it for yourself. Which is I literally, I just read that yesterday. There's a sales trainer named Sandler or something or other, and he was speaking about how he was terrified to cold call, so he would call insurance companies and say, I will do a cold calling training for you. And when he got in front of a bunch of people, he was able to cold call for his own business. And it was like, I can't do it for myself, but I could do it for you. And so you're saying that it's not that you couldn't stand up for yourself or you couldn't stand up against authority, but you really needed to do it for your son's sake in order to find that you had that capacity. That I think is a very important hack, number one, for people that feel like, well, I can't do this for myself. So, okay, so find, if you can't fundraise for your own organization, find an organization and fundraise for them, because then it's, then you'll learn the skills and see that you're capable of doing it. Then it's bring it back on yourself. The second point is why you can't stay in that trap for such a long time is when you start to feel like, hey, you know what? When I do this art, it really does have a much higher value than you, the consumer, in this specific case, is valuing it for. And when you start to feel that dichotomy, I guess that's also a sign that you have to kind of go on your own and really start to, I guess you could say, ask for what you're worth. But again, you won't be able to do that unless you have enough confidence to say, you know what, I'm actually not worth that, I'm worth this.
Yes. Yeah. Good clarification. And it's a step-by-step process. Knowing your worth, it took a long time. I mean,
what's a long time? Because I think a lot of people are thinking like 2 weeks.
No. So when I started coaching, it was 2007. That's 12 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm in coaching school and they're telling us to go out and get clients. And they say, charge them what they would pay for a movie. If you're uncomfortable charging, then it was like $10 or something. And so, just knowing that somebody
I should have been hiring coaches back then.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, you're practicing. You don't know what you're doing yet. You kind of do, but you need people to practice on. And so you're starting with $10, then it's $50. And then, it was $200 a month. And, so I watched it grow. I have one client I've been working with for 11 years, and I've raised her prices over time. It's amazing to have a steady client that wants to work with you week after week. And she's more of a business consultation client. But you take a person like that who hired me to help her stop being a people pleaser, to really refine her client base, because she was accepting in whoever landed there. And so she wasn't actively choosing. She wasn't knowing what she wanted or what her value really was. She was also hiding, meaning she didn't have a website. She was not on social media. So nobody knew who she was except if it was word of mouth. Word of mouth is limiting. So knowing all these things that I've taught her, now she has social media presence, she's online, she's got really clear with who her ideal client is, what her ideal job is. Why do I want to work like this? And she's able to convey that and walk away from things that don't work for her. So before you asked me, do you just, dump it all? And how do you get from that space of feeling like your soul is sucked out of your body to doing the work you love? And I do think it's baby steps often. But you have to create the space. You look at your life and see how are you spending your time? Are you on Facebook for 2 hours? That's 2 hours that you could spend developing a business plan, getting one client, doing one thing that lights you up. Maybe it's a hobby, it doesn't even have to be work. Maybe you wanted to write a book your whole life and you go, I don't have time to write a book. A lot of times that's your demon speaking. It's not true. And so, you mentioned fear before, and I want to talk about that for a minute. So this book I'm reading by Tara Moore, she's a woman who graduated from my coaching school, CTI, and she wrote a book called Playing Bigger or something like that, or just Playing Bigger. Anyway, she writes about the difference between two types of fear. So there's that fear that you had it was an irrational fear based on some rationality that there could be earthquakes in California. but the chance of it happening wasn't imminent. And then there's the fear that's keeping you from your greatest self. It's that I can't write that book. I'm not enough. Who am I? I don't have a voice. Those are fears that are trying to keep you small and not risk rejection, criticism. It's like the original shy me, that fear. And so so she actually describes it in Jewish terms of pachad and yira. So pachad is that oh my God, I'm scared to go out in the storm because there's ice on the street and I could really get hurt. So that's a real fear. Yira is more awe. It's, this is this, and you need to really identify what kind of fear am I feeling? So if it's that yira, it's that awe that if I overcome this, if I do this, it's awe-inspiring. It's going to raise me up to be the best I can be.
That's powerful. So to articulate that back, the things that we should be working on trying to fix are the voices that tell us no, I guess you can say.
No, you're not enough. You suck at that.
Is there ever a time when the voices are right?
Then it would be more pachad. Yeah, it would be very like.
No, I'm saying, look,
not so good at that.
I have a way of looking at, and it's I could be wrong, whatever it is. I usually tell people that if you have, a desire to do something, it usually means that, that might be something that you should be doing. So it's like if you're, boy, I would love to X, Y, and Z, but I'm, practically speaking, that's fair. I said, well, let's look at X, Y, and Z. Probably the reason why that's interesting for you is because I meet people that actually like doing math. I'm like, wow, I guess there are people like you that exist in the world, right? So the fact that we have a desire for something a lot of times implies I could do that. But is there ever a good idea to say no? And I'm going to
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and review our podcast on iTunes, which will allow you to be the first ones to know when new episodes are updated. Also, please visit our website at ojchamber.com. And if you aren't yet a member, please make sure to sign up. Membership is free. Thank you so much and speak to you soon.
Step back and say, is this really working? So in my business, there have been many things that have not worked. I've tried them. Sometimes they work for a year, 2 years, and then it's time to move on. So it's the same thing with, this new business. I found that the common thread that started back when I was a little girl was it's important to have a voice. It's important to feel that we all have power, that we all have, the ability to rise up, to be all we can be. And how great would it be if more of us could do that? And so it hurts me to see people who are diminishing themselves, who are saying, I'm sorry, sorry, sorry all the time. And, using words like, I'm just a housewife. I'm just a whatever, and it's like, no, you're not just anything. And so it's been in me, and also when I used to speak up, I wasn't heard. And so that was infuriating. I had a voice. I would use words sometimes that would be off-putting. I wanted to say to the doctor, you kept me waiting for 2 hours in the waiting room. That didn't work for me. And they'd be like, who cares? I don't want to hear that from you. That's not, so it's important to know how to speak up, who to speak up to, how to use your voice, how to be empowered in all ways. And so it's not just a woman thing, but it is something that's near and dear to my heart. And it was something that I was helping all my dating coaching clients with. It was the part that I loved the most. Because once they found their value and stepped into that place and learned to communicate more effectively and set boundaries and get clear about who should be in their life and who's toxic and make space for the right people to show up, their whole life changed, and they were able to do so many other things, like ask for more money at a job and have better relationships with their adult children and their friendships that they've been tolerating people treating them poorly for a long time.
So
And so that's, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like everything in life, in a lot of ways, is very fluid, and that most, and I think this is an important point, even though we sort of like all sort of like know this, but that all the limitations that we experience in our life are negotiable, and that a person has to appreciate that they are essentially where they are because that's the sum total of the choices that they have or the perspective that they have. And I'm just thinking, I think that in a relationship, this concept of stability and this concept of control, and I definitely hear how for so many women, and I think that there's a male equivalent as well, but so many people are operating because their partner is controlling them, that the idea of sort of stepping into themselves and standing up for themselves sounds absolutely terrifying. So they don't do it. But what you're saying is that it is possible, theoretically speaking, to be you yourself and still not destroy everything around you. That whole idea is like, well, I could start a business, but no one's going to give me any money, so I'm just going to go broke and I'm going to starve. It's like, well, not really. Don't be an idiot, right? Learn the skills, but it's very possible that you could actually show up as a more authentic version of yourself and people might hate you for it.
Yeah, and some people might hate you for it, and that's okay.
That's okay.
Right. It's get comfortable with the discomfort of that. And your job is not to make everybody happy. When you start making yourself happy, when you start living aligned with your truth, you're going to piss a lot of people off.
Okay.
There's no question.
Okay. Why does it have to be that way?
Because the people who you're going to make angry are people who are used to you being easygoing.
You're saying in your own circles. It's not like the Democrats are going to get angry at you or the Republicans, but it's more like your best friend of 20 years is going to be like, hey, you weren't complaining about the the kind of popcorn at the movie theater before, and now you're earning a refund. Like, why are you doing that?
Or I mean, my kids. Like I first of all, I was petrified that my kids would be so terribly affected by the divorce. Mm-hmm. That was what kept me married for so long. And I realized that it was so much better for them. And you hear this from a lot of people, that once you make the move, it depends on how you handle it. So I spent a lot of time working with my kids, making sure they were emotionally stable, that they had the tools to speak their emotions, to speak up when they felt hurt, and I learned important life lessons about myself through my kids, about boundaries, about, the importance of setting firm but loving boundaries with my children. Some of them really kept pushing my boundaries over and over and over again. And I couldn't control her, but I could control myself. And I hired a coach to work with me to help me understand how to improve the relationship. And it worked. And it's, just defining my value and telling my kids, look, things are going to change. And I am no longer running your errands all day and doing all these things for you. We're a team now. And here's how it works. And designing the new alliance that we were going to have made them respect me more. And I mean, it was amazing. Like in my marriage, they basically treated me pretty terribly. And I allowed a lot of it because I didn't know what to do anymore. And I felt very powerless. So knowing that by setting those limits, by giving them more responsibility, they began to respect me more. And we have a great relationship. I mean, they come to me they trust me. They come to me with all issues. We're able to talk stuff out. They're all really balanced, great people. And I don't know if they would have had the same results if I stayed married.
Which is it's just such a crazy idea that I guess that's the point. It's like, that's on the other side of the fear, is that things actually do work out okay if you step into where you need to go. And as much as we try to maintain status quo, oftentimes those are the biggest things that hold us back, as opposed to all the other perceived things. There's a lot there, and also the idea of getting the help you need when you need it, and it's not a sign of weakness, but just you kind of need that outside perspective to get to your next station, I guess you can say, in life.
Yeah, it's a sign of incredible strength, I think, when people reach out for support, and it's humbling to know, first of all, to admit that you can't do it all, and you can't do it all alone. But I think that, again, it's about aligning with your truth. I was living my truth, and my kids saw that I was so much more of a person. They actually, and this really surprised me, but they told me that they don't even remember me from before the divorce. Like I was like an invisible person to them, wow, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But that is how they saw me. And so, we need to be visible. We need to live in alignment with our truths. Because if we're always trying to make everybody else happy, we're giving up something. There's a cost to it. And so that whole people-pleasing thing, I mean, I work with women all the time on this. It's so easy to want to just say yes to everything. And then you feel taken advantage of, you feel depleted. And it's not okay. It doesn't feel good to the other person either to know that you're saying yes to something you mean no to.
Right. And you don't have the fortitude to be able to actually stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
But standing up for yourself means you're aligning with your truth. It all comes back to that. And so I would much rather be with somebody who knows themselves well enough to say that doesn't work for me than somebody who just said yes and then secretly was pissed off.
That hates you because of what happened. Right. 100%.
Yeah. I mean, I've had that. I had a recent issue with that with somebody, and she doesn't believe in confrontation at all. And so a lot of people will not confront. They would rather just bypass. And I don't think confrontation sounds hard and harsh and mean. And I think it's just, we have to deal with stuff when it comes up. And the more we get used to doing that, it becomes easier. It's not this difficult, awful thing that you're doing at somebody. You're actually doing it because you want to work things out. You want to get closer. So your intention is good.
It's a step in the right direction. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it takes courage, but it also takes practice and it takes skills.
Amazing. Sandy, thank you so much. How do people find you and all the great work you are doing?
So the new website is The Woman of Value. It's woman in singular.com. And so my podcast will probably be ready in about a month, but all the private coaching, lunch and learns, everything that I do is there. Lots of blog posts about things like settling, like we talked about today. And you can also find me at lastfirstdate.com, and all my social medias on the website.
Outstanding. Sandy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and review our podcast on iTunes, which will allow you to be the first ones to know when new episodes are updated. Also, please visit our website at ojchamber.com. And if you aren't yet a member, please make sure to sign up. Membership is free. Thank you so much, and speak to you soon.